It didn't matter. It would have taken too much effort to correct him, so she left it alone. To be fair, she understood where Tianyu was coming from. Special treatment, she thought. She supposed she couldn't really blame anyone for accusing her of that. Under normal circumstances, Maomao would not have walked this dim, dank hallway with the doctors. The hallway led to the room where executed criminals were placed in repose. The doctors were using a special passageway so that no one would see them go there. It was not, however, the first time Maomao had used it. No, that was when she had gone to see if Suhari was truly dead. Suhari was now living with the former consort R duo. She kind of wished she could have learned surgery as well. Once, while traveling to the western capital, she had helped Maomao treat some injured guards. She had proven unflappable, even though the treatment included amputating a human arm. She would have done well here. I suppose the circumstances of her birth made it impossible, Maomao thought. It wasn't officially acknowledged, but Suhari was the former emperor's granddaughter. She was also a member of the exterminated Shi clan. Because of this, her life had been spared, but she was fated to remain in the shadows as long as she lived. It was such a waste. Maomao could only lament this situation. Anything beyond that was beyond her power. One might think Suhari should have stayed dead, but that would be an affront. She could not forget the other girl who had given a once-in-a-lifetime performance so that Suhari could live. So who is backing your participation here? Tianyu asked. Are you accusing me of nepotism? Maomao asked. It was the same thing she had been suspected of when she first joined the staff at the medical office. No, Tianyu replied. I think it is something bigger than that. It is men's intuition. This son of a how could Tianyu act so frothy and yet be so perceptive? It would be bad for everyone if he discovered Jinchi's involvement here. I'm telling NN, Maomao said. She is not here, so how could you tell her? Tianyu replied. It did not quite throw him off the subject, but it bought her enough time. They had arrived at their destination. Dr. Liu said here and pointed to a door at the end of the hallway. The door opened with a great heavy creaking. A fresh blast of damp, humid air rushed out. Maomao thought, I smell alcohol. She loved spirits, so it should have been a comfort to her, but she just wasn't in the mood to drink at that moment. A man lay on a cot in the middle of the room. He was face up and completely naked. Bruises from a rope marked his neck. He was a criminal executed by hanging. The smell of alcohol was likely from the body being wiped down. Dr. Liu said, we will put on smocks, but try not to get them dirty if you can. Maomao took the apron she was given and put it on. She was also handed a white bandana. It wasn't to tie back her hair but to put over her face, covering everything below the eyes. Dr. Liu continued, I'm going to do the cutting. You're going to watch me, and you're going to burn every organ, every layer of tissue into your memory. He was already holding a dissecting knife. I want you to remember every single thing you see here. His tone was downright threatening. They had been warned not to take any notes. The very fact that Dr. Liu was here teaching them, this was supposedly something that could not happen. The only thing they could take with them from this place was what they could remember. So it comes down to a conflict between public morals and medical progress. The physicians did not want to do anything too openly, so they compromised. The small, sharp knife slid easily into the body's portly abdomen. The cut wasn't deep enough to make blood spurt, but the flesh wasn't stiff either. Dr. Liu had chosen a body where rigor mortis had worn off. He laid open the corpse and began showing them the internal organs. These were much easier to see than they had been on the freshly slaughtered livestock. Working with an actual human corpse, however, felt a little close to home. The students were by now accustomed to working with animals, but even so a couple of them put their hands to their mouths. This is the heart, Dr. Liu told them. You should not cut the large blood vessels connected to it under any circumstances. He continued through the organs, the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. These comprise the digestive tract. You should recognize them. We've made enough sausages from intestines. They had done it on his orders, in fact. He had told them their animals were not to be wasted. The sausages were delicious, but it seemed a few of the apprentices might never eat another one again. Here are the reproductive organs. I will call you the moment they execute a female prisoner. The reproductive organs take a different form in women, needless to say. By this point in her life, Maomao was neither surprised nor scandalized by the sight of male genitalia. "Can anyone tell me what disease this man suffered from?" Dr. Liu asked them. Maomao thought it was hard to tell. The man had been dead for days. That meant the color of his skin was no longer a reliable guide to his condition. She thought she could see some splotches. Although this was her first time seeing human internal organs up close, she thought she could make a guess. No one else seemed willing to answer, so she ventured, "Was it a disease of the liver, sir?" Maomao wasn't eager to stand out too much, but somebody had to answer or they would be stuck here forever. "What is your basis for suggesting that?" Dr. Liu asked. "I cannot shake the sense that the color of his liver is poor compared to the animals we have worked with. There are also some yellow discolorations on his skin, and jaundice is a good indicator of liver problems. Yao had the same symptom. You pass." This man got drunk and became violent. He picked a fight with another customer at the bar and ended up killing him. He even killed his own mother when she tried to stop him. In fact, he had just been released from prison for a previous offense. He was out of second chances, hence the hanging. This liver is noticeably inflamed, and it would be more obvious if we could compare it to a healthy one. Too much alcohol is usually the cause, but sometimes it can be contaminated by blood. So be careful not to get any cuts or injuries on your hands while working with it. The poison can enter your body through the wound and make you sick. Dr. Liu's tone was so intimidating that even Tianyu didn't have a smart remark. His eyes were wide as he studied the organ intently. He seemed to show an unanticipated serious streak when they were actually at work. Maomao looked much like him. She was staring hard at the dissected body, taking it all in. She made sure she didn't miss a word the doctor said, intimidating or not. When their special class was over, the students changed and headed for the bathhouse. They went to a bathhouse right next to a temple. One could imagine the bathhouse had started as a place for clergy to purify themselves. But now the establishment demanded secular currency. The baths were divided by gender, not mixed. Here in the middle of the day the place wasn't very busy. Nonetheless, the changing room felt cramped. The closely packed shelves likely had room for 15 sets of clothes. There were several bathhouses in the capital, and this one was clean and well maintained, if not the most lavish. The water was good and hot, and there were few other bathers. Maomao thought this was paradise. The students had been told they could go home after washing, so she would take the time to clean her hair today. She washed away the clinging feel of the dampness and the dark. It mattered so much to have these moments when you could simply soak in the bath and think about nothing. It sucks that we could not write anything down, she thought. But if they did, their notes would become forbidden books. Today they had only observed, but in the future Maomao and the others would be expected to do the dissection themselves. Maomao had been surprised by how calm and rational she remained in the presence of a corpse. Perhaps it was because I had never seen him before. Perhaps it was because he was a criminal. Or perhaps I could tell myself it was his own fault he died. Would she have been able to do the same if it had been someone she knew? Perhaps it helped that they were cutting into something that had formerly been a person, not a live one. Maomao thought of Liu Men's hidden book. He had said it was his teacher on the last page. She hadn't looked very old, though not in his drawings. I cannot imagine how he felt when he was making those illustrations. What must Liu Men's teacher have meant to him? Just as Maomao was letting out another sigh, some young women came into the bath. "Think they'd take me?" one of them said. "Sure, definitely," the other replied. Maomao listened, wondering what they were talking about. She heard they hadn't put out a call in a long time, though. "You know, for ladies of the rear palace, that's exactly it. They must be getting low on numbers now. Is your chance. A call for ladies for the rear palace." Maomao frowned thoughtfully. Hadn't Jinchi said that Jyakuo's daughter, Empress Jyakuo's niece, was going to enter the palace? Even if they had found a way to postpone the event, they did ask for volunteers. Such a young woman could not have only ladies in waiting from the western capital around her. Also, she was the child of someone very important and influential. Everyone talks about the crown prince, but the emperor currently has only 2 sons. There were plenty of chances to find your place. You can't have too many sons, right? Wow, this young lady had ambition. She was planning not only to enter the rear palace as a palace woman, but to become the emperor's bedmate and even a mother of the nation. If you're going to dream, dream big. Maomao figured things would end up very differently from what the woman expected, though. She nodded and water droplets fell from her wet bangs. That reminded her of something. She knew they would leave for the western capital before the new consort arrived, but she still hadn't heard the exact date. She didn't even know who else would be coming with them. She thought she would ask him next time. Then she heaved herself out of the bath and headed for the changing room. Chapter 12, The Secret of the Numbers. Jinchi gave a great stretch. It was his reward for finishing a chunk of his work. He was alone in his office, or not exactly. The sound of someone shuffling papers came from behind a screen. Who was it? Baryu, who had social anxiety. Jinchi was almost finished with his work, but he wanted to ask Baryu something. Baryu, may I ask you a question? A thin voice replied from behind the screen. Yes, sir, what is it? How did your love story begin? HRM. How did love begin? If I said Chu, would you understand? Love might seem like a strange topic to discuss, but despite his quiet demeanor and reserved attitude, Baryu was actually a married man. He was married to someone who had recently begun serving as one of Jinchi's ladies-in-waiting Chu. Jinchi had one main condition when choosing his attendants. They were never to spare him even an amorous glance. Chu certainly met that requirement. Yes, she hardly seems human, does she? Baryu replied. It seemed like another statement that would invite misunderstanding. Is she your wife? You have children, don't you? Jinchi had to admit it was difficult to see how a woman with such a forceful personality ever worked with Baryu. His curiosity had driven him to ask about their love story, but he did not quite expect the answer he received. It was a bit of scheming on the part of her mother and her older sister Maomao. They looked at me and they looked at Basin. They chose the most certain way to continue the family line. Jinchi was speechless. I agreed, with the condition that they would handle all of the child rearing, and so the marriage was decided. We only see each other face to face once every 2 weeks and we do not talk much. However, I must say I think we get along rather well. Yes, I mean, if you say so. The Bar brothers seem to be polar opposites of each other. Jinchi understood why some people thought the frail Baryu was a better match than the powerful Basin. It was a political marriage entirely. They said there was no telling how long she might live, and told her to hurry and produce some heirs. They even wanted me to prioritize it over taking the civil service exam. Baryu had passed the civil service exam 2 years earlier. This meant he had taken it only after his children were conceived. She is certainly unique, Jinchi said, but with Suhan to keep her in line, she has been a quite trustworthy helper. It actually reminded him of the time when Maomao had been working under him. She comes from the Ma clan, although it is a subsidiary line. That would explain a great deal. The Ma clan provided bodyguards for the imperial family. The Ma clan produced an information network that served the emperor and his kin directly. They both guarded the royal family. One did so in the light and the other from the shadows. It made sense that they might sometimes arrange marriages between family members. This would strengthen the bonds between them. Jinchi remarked, I see it is not easy being you. I dare say you have far more troubles than I, Master Jinchi. Regarding both your appearance and your position. As for myself, my sister advised me to simply rest quietly at night, and my wife would handle everything else. Once again, Jinchi had no response. Baryu had spoken rather impudently, and followed it with something Jinchi distinctly felt he shouldn't have overheard. How easy life would be if Jinchi could accept a political marriage as readily as Baryu. Their chat was interrupted by the sound of someone coming down the hallway. The hall outside Jinchi's office was specifically designed to make footsteps echo audibly. Ah, speaking of my sister, there she is now, Baryu said. Then he added, if you ever find yourself unsure how to handle Chu, just ask her. The footsteps came from a woman wearing shoes. Jinchi generally kept court ladies at arm's length because he found it created fewer problems. It was natural to assume Maomao was approaching. Thank you, Jinchi replied, but forget about Chu. He had simply been curious about how love took root. Unfortunately, the inquiry hadn't given him any useful insight. There was a knock on the door, and Maomao appeared with paperwork in one hand and tea supplies in the other. "Hello, I'm back." "What's with you two?" she asked when she saw them both staring at her. Jinchi did not intend to ask her about Chu at that moment. If he wasn't careful, there was a chance that Maomao would get the wrong idea, and he would never live it down. Baryu and Basin were not the only ones who felt intimidated by this formidable woman. He tried to think of some way to distract her. "You are trying to think of some way to distract me, aren't you?" Maomao said, fixing him with a glare. "Who, me?" No, I was just wondering if we had an answer yet regarding what I asked you about." What he had asked her about was the tie attached to Gyuku-O's recent letter. Jinchi was flummoxed by the sheet of numbers, so he called in an expert. "Ah, you mean Master Lahan. I happen to have a letter from him right here. When you thought of numbers, you thought of Lahan. It had been the obvious solution, and in this case it appeared it had also been the right one." Jinchi opened the letter, which detailed the truth behind the numbers. "May I see it?" Maomao asked, coming over. Jinchi placed the letter on the desk. Even Baryu seemed intrigued enough to emerge from behind his screen. "What is this?" Maomao said. "An account ledger," Jinchi replied. Lahan had sent them a copy of a ledger. It appeared to be related to taxes levied on crops. A certain percentage of the taxes collected in the Western capital were sent to the national centre. The tie appeared to be made of several battered pages. These were likely records from the same area, covering several years. "Perhaps this is it," said Maomao. It looked to be from the first half of the previous year. The Western capital did not produce many crops, but it had some. Wheat and grapes were grown there, along with cotton and sugar beets. Sheep's wool was another major export of the region. As Maomao indicated, the records matched up with the mysterious numbers they had been sent. The numbers, ranging from 2 to 4 digits, indicated harvest quantities. To find the amount of tax collected, multiply each number by the tax rate. Look here, the numbers are different." Maomao's finger paused over the wheat data. The number in the ledger was larger there and only there. If the numbers are different, it implies someone doctored the ledger. "But this does not make any sense." "I agree. I do not understand," said Jinchi. "If the number in the ledger had been smaller, it would have been simple. The impropriety would be exposed. But the number they reported was larger. This meant someone had reported more than had actually been harvested. Naturally, that would mean more taxes would be collected. They are deliberately paying too much in taxes. Jinchi couldn't understand why they would do that. It could only harm them. It might not make sense to him, but it seemed Lahan had decided that the numbers they had been sent pertained to taxes levied on the harvest. "That is very nice of them to pay more than they owe, but it sure smells fishy," Maomao said. "Is wheat the only number they doctored?" Baryu asked, looking through several years of registers. "It seems all the harvests were smaller than average last year. If this message or whatever it is to be believed, wheat was particularly scarce," Jinchi said, squinting at the rows of figures. The Western capital region had been warned to take precautions against insect plague. If they were seeking to hide the true state of things, this would be one way to do it. "When is wheat harvested?" Jinchi asked. "Well, there's winter wheat and there's spring wheat, so it depends. But the first half of the year would be the winter wheat harvest at the beginning of summer," replied Baryu, meaning it was long after Jinchi had left the area, and even after the Empress's father Gyukyun had come to the capital. "I'm impressed he was able to spot that in all this," Maomao said, full of admiration for Lahan's work. It was true that noticing the difference in the numbers was an impressive feat, even though they were numbers he dealt with in his work. Baryu said, "He mentioned something about that in his last letter, and he searched through his papers. The registers we were sent included the seal of someone I know. I remember it. A seal belonging to someone you know." Lahan's letter continued, giving a name that Jinchi also recognized. He thought back to the people who had traveled with him to the Western capital last year. There had been Maomao and Duo as well as Lahan. They were all energetic and memorable people, but there was one who seemed more detached. "Rikyusen, he was Grand Commandant Kan's aide, wasn't he?" Baryu said. "Yes, I believe I've heard that name before," Maomao said. "Rikyusen was the eccentric strategist's right-hand man." The man who had danced with Maomao at the banquet in the western capital was currently serving as Jyakuo's aide. Jyakuan had requested it. And did you hear anything specific about him, Mame? Jinshi asked. All he really knew about Rikusen was his job title. He didn't even know what the man was like. All he knew was that he had seen a side of Rikusen he didn't like much. It was hard to get away from that bad first impression. About Master Rikusen, let me see. I am afraid everything I know about him is hearsay, Mame replied while she prepared the tea. He was a civil official before he served Master Lacan, but my understanding is that he did not reach that position by passing the civil service examinations. He had connections. He comes from a merchant family, and his gentle disposition always gave him a certain popularity with the court ladies. Perhaps that was also where Mame had gotten her information. Who were these connections? I'm afraid I'm not sure.